Welcome to Life Happens, where Texans come to protect their legacy and prepare for the second half of life. Join your host, attorney Kim Hegwood of Your Legacy Legal Care, and our weekly guest as we navigate the challenges that emerge as life happens. Now here's your host, Kim Hegwood.
Good morning. Welcome to Life Happens with me, Kim Hegwood, and our very special guest today. And to my left, or maybe hopefully your left too, when you're watching, is Peter Berry. He's an author of the Dementia Survivor. To his right is his best friend and helping him with a lot of things. And so is Deb Bunt. And I just appreciate both of y'all being on today.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. It really is.
And so, Peter, we're going to really kind of concentrate on you today, and for the most part. And so you were diagnosed with early onset dementia. Can you tell our listeners how old you were and how did it change your life?
Yes. Hi, everybody. I was diagnosed at the age of 50. And I didn't realize at that time that people in my age group could get dementia. I was on the impression it was for older people in care and towards, I suppose, the latter part of their lives. I was running a successful timber business at the time, and everything was pretty much okay. And dementia came along, and I suppose really affected our lives as a family and me as running my business. And it really made things extremely, extremely difficult. And I suppose looking back started us on this colourful journey that we are on now. And I come to realize over a period of time, and it took me a long time to realize it, that life wasn't over with dementia. It was just going to be quite a bit different.
And so when you talk about dementia and you talk about your dementia monster, how did putting a face to that monster, kind of help you move forward?
I've always been a very hands-on person. I've always been somebody who has solved problems in a practical way. I've never been any good at maths or anything like that, but give me something that is broken and I can inevitably fix it. Having a problem like dementia that was inside here that I couldn't get at, I couldn't do anything with it. It wasn't like a broken arm or a leg. I couldn't see it. I couldn't physically do anything with it. So in order for me to cope with it, I suppose, and to deal with what it was and what it was making me, or what I had become as a result of that dementia, I needed to create something. I needed to manufacture a thing that I could deal with. So I came up with this idea of a dementia monster, something that I could relate to, something that I could actually physically do something with. It was an ugly monster that sort of was in charge of my life, and I think we have a drawing of it here that I drew.
I can see it. Wow.
Okay. So
that does look a little scary, doesn't it?
He was quite an ugly Humpty Dumpty, if you want, I suppose, really. Mm-hmm. And I had this vision that while I was with my monster, or he was with me, he was in charge of my life. He was controlling me as a person. But when I went out and did my own thing, I got away from my monster and I was in control of my life. So cycling was one of those things that actually did that for me. That gave me the option to get away. That was one of the things of living well with dementia. Now I come to realize that it doesn't have to be cycling. It can be gardening, walking, just having a cup of coffee with some friends. Getting away from your monster is an important factor. When you come back to your monster, you can somehow cope with it better. You can deal with him better, or her, come to that. And it's something that just was something that I needed to help me achieve living well. And also that monster doesn't just relate to the person living with dementia. That also relates to friends and family. I often say that I have a dementia monster. My wife also has a dementia monster, and that's me. So she needs to get away from her monster as well. And that's another important factor that people often overlook. Sometimes life can be all about the person with the condition, but in actual fact, it's also about the people around us as well. They are just, if not more important than us to a degree.
Yes, that I can appreciate. And so a lot of people, we talk a lot about caregivers, and making sure that they're good, that they're taking care of themselves as well, because it's so important. And most caregivers feel guilty for doing things for themselves. And so we have to tell them it's important. You got to do it, so let's kind of switch gears just a little bit, and let's talk about and kind of walk me through the difference in what you consider the value of support as opposed to care, and how the right support can delay the need for care. Because I didn't really kind of, when I first thought about it, I was like, I'm not sure is it what the difference is in some aspects of it. So I'm curious to hear your response.
My father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's in his, I think it would have been early 70s. And that was quite some years ago. And he lived with the condition for 22, 3 years, maybe a little bit longer. Looking back at that, I didn't realize what I was doing for him at that time. But now I'm in a similar situation to him. I understand it. So an example of that was my father was diagnosed, yet he continued to come up to our sawmill and work as he always did. He continued to do the things that he wanted to do. And I supported him in that. He didn't just sit around at home not doing things. He wasn't told he couldn't do this, he can't do that, he mustn't do this. He was told, yes, you've done it for your entire life. If you want to carry on doing something up at the sawmill, do it within reason and within the boundaries of safety. So I supported him like that. And I strongly believe now that doing that meant that he carried on for not far short of 25 years, living well with that condition. Had I not done what I did for him at that time, he would have probably gone 8 to 10 years. Now, that reflection on how I live my life. So I'm supported by my wife, family, and Deb. But also I support them as well. I have a sense of purpose. Now, all of that creates support and not care. If I was allowed to have a diagnosis, go into the depression that I did go in for the first 12 months, and not allowed to cycle across our country, not allowed to cycle around the country, not allowed to achieve all the daredevil things that I do, all the weird and wonderful ideas that I come up with, then I wouldn't be as good as I am now. It's because the people around me have supported me that I don't need additional care. Support can come in many different ways. Friends and family are very good at supporting people with dementia. And that's mainly because friends and family know the person prior to dementia. I knew my father all my life. So once he got dementia, it didn't matter because I knew his history. So I could support him in everything he wanted to do because I knew him from the inside out. If you've got a large organization that can come in, they only know the person with dementia. They can't really support that person as well as people who know them can. So it then becomes a form of care. But if people are around friends and family, and friends and family can be adapted to get inside the person's head with dementia and support them, then care can be a long, long way ahead. And also, the family can live better as well, because if I'm doing okay, everybody around me is doing okay. Once I start to get down and get into trouble, then everybody else around me does as well. And that's a bad place. Dementia is a pebble that is dropped into a pond, and it creates ripples, and then ripples go out and they gradually get bigger and they affect everybody. That's what it's like. And we've got to keep those ripples to a minimum.
It's a great analogy. And so, thank you for that, because that really makes a whole lot of sense in the overall scheme of things, for sure. And so tell our listeners, what kind of suggestions do you have for families that have been diagnosed with early onset dementia?
Dementia is a very complicated disease, but it is surrounded by simplicity. Families shouldn't delve into the complicated part of dementia. Why is uncle, aunt, granddad, mother, father, husband, wife thinking what they're thinking? You should try and deal with the simple part. Try and get onto the outside of the dementia. If you're drawing a picture with a 3-year-old, you don't draw a complicated landscape with great architecture and fantastic buildings. You draw a stick person and a sun and some trees and a few flowers. You get into their world. And it's so easy to do that with somebody who is younger than ourselves. But for some reason, people can't seem to do it with somebody, their own age group or older than them. They seem to try to work out the mechanics of dementia. And we will never do that, because dementia is such a moving target that nobody's ever really going to hit it, whether it's professional or whether it's friends and families. Just try to let the person with dementia be themselves. And I'll give you a classic example here. When I used to take my father out in the car, he would ask me what the time was. So we would get in the car and he would say, "What's the time, Peter?" "Oh, I'd say 2 o'clock, Father." "You haven't got the time on you, have you?" "Oh, I'd say 2 o'clock, Father." "Oh. I don't suppose you'd happen to know what the time is, would you, Peter?" I said, "Yes, just gone 2 o'clock, Father," and so on and so forth. Now, my mother would find this very complicated. She would get very upset, very distraught, and therefore so would Father. So the simple part of dementia, I bought a clock and I stuck it to the dashboard right in front of where Father sat. He never asked what the time was. It was so simple to do, and yet it created a relief for him, a relief for me, and made his life and my life better. I just uncomplicated dementia. Simple little things like that can do it. If somebody can't remember who you are, be their friend for now. Don't worry about that they can't remember who you are. You know who you are. And because they don't know it that day, it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter at that time, because you're still their son, brother, mother, wife, husband, whatever. It's just they can't remember at that point in time. If you happen to meet somebody in the street and give the person with dementia prompts, say, "Hello, Dave, how are you?" So the person with dementia knows it's Dave. Ask Dave if he's still cycling, so the person with dementia knows that it's Dave and he does cycling. Fill in the colours for people with dementia. People with dementia, their minds can be sometimes just a pencil drawing. We need those around us just to colour them in for us. And then it makes life so much simpler. And little simple things like that just work.
So what kind of suggestions, because those are great suggestions. So what kind of suggestions do you have for that person that's been diagnosed with early onset dementia?
Dementia is not the end of your life. It's just the beginning of something different. They tell us that we only live once. That's rubbish. We die once. We live every day. Just because you've had a diagnosis of dementia doesn't mean that you are going to change overnight. You're not going to be different next week, next month, and probably not that much difference next year. So don't worry about it. Concentrate on the things you can do, not the things you can't do. Because the things that you can do will give you a boost. They will make you feel as though you're achieving things. Getting frustrated about the things that you can't do will only drag you down. And that in turn will drag everybody else down around you. And just live your life. Do the things that you want to do within reason. And in a funny sort of way, forget you have dementia. Because I wasted 12 months of my life in a deep depression, and then realizing that what was I doing? Why was I doing that? And here we are, X amount of years later, and I've probably achieved more over the last 5 or 6 years than I had 5 or 6 years prior to dementia. So take that and use it to your advantage. Don't let dementia take too much from you. Try and take from it. And just live every day and just have fun, because that's what life's about. Try and live today. Don't worry about next week or tomorrow or 10 months' time, because worrying about it won't change it. And I've learned that. And we have to use the precious days that we have, use them wisely.
So let's talk about your books. This is where Deb comes in. So she's been helping you or authoring your books. And so tell us what kind of books you have, and then I want you to tell the listeners where they find them.
So let me just clarify something. I've only known Peter for 5 years when I moved from London up to Suffolk. I had never met anybody of Peter's age with dementia. And we randomly bumped into each other. I live in a small town. We bumped into each other in a bicycle shop, became friends, started to cycle everywhere. And Peter started to tell me his experiences of living with dementia, the emotional side of it, the impact of it, alongside all the activities and challenges he was doing for charity and awareness raising. Now, one of the things I've always wanted to be was a writer. So suddenly I heard Peter's story and I thought, aha, this should go in a book. So the book is called Slow Puncher, Living Well with Dementia. That's Peter on the front on a penny farthing bike, which you haven't talked about.
No.
But we only have 20 minutes, so we can't. And the book is kind of told from both our viewpoints. It's the story of Peter's diagnosis and the challenges and his experiences of living with dementia. And it's my perspective about learning about dementia and learning about myself too, through listening to Peter, learning about the value of life, the importance of life. You know, we can moan about the petty things in life, but actually Peter's story was a bit of a slap around the face for me and refocused the way I looked at life. So the first book came out 3 years ago. The second book, which is called Walk With Me, Musings Through the Dementia Fog. This is I can't really flick it that way. This is a poetry book. Now, when I say poetry, Peter hasn't sat down and composed poems and spent hours scratching his head and trying to get everything right. These are thoughts that Peter has over the last couple of years about what it's like to live with dementia. And he would send them to me via text, and I would keep a note of them. And I thought it was a bit like taking the top off his head and having a little rummage to see what was going on inside. You know, what is it like being Peter? What does it feel like living with dementia? And I thought they were worthy of putting into a book. They're illustrated by some lovely photos of where we live in Suffolk. And they're sort of chronological too, so you can see a development in the way Peter was thinking. And it's very much a book about friendship and keeping Peter's thoughts there, because Peter says that your words are written in the sand and washed away. Mm-hmm. So my job was to kind of chisel those words out more permanently. And I think having 2 books has helped us to do that. And it's fulfilled a lifelong ambition for me. So when Peter talks about taking from dementia, I too have taken from his dementia.
Well, that is awesome. Awesome. I couldn't be more proud of the 2 of you. And so
you would be proud, aren't we?
Thank you very much.
You should be proud of yourselves. You know, you took something that could have been devastating and you could have crawled in a ball and stayed there. And instead, you've embraced life. and gave lots of information for other people that are potentially maybe going through the same thing. So, so it's been truly a pleasure having the two of you on the show today. And so I hope that you continue to cycle, because it's not something I enjoy, and sounds like too much work. But I hope that you continue, and you're able to do as much as you can, as long as possible, always. So if somebody wants to find you, can you tell us what the website is?
Sure, it's www.peter-berry.com, and the website has links to all the other social media that we keep for Peter, so Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and the website also has a sort of an up-to-date version of what Peter's been up to, so it's quite a nice way of staying tuned to what he's been doing. And if anyone wants to contact me directly, more than happy to answer emails. It's deb.bunt@btopenworld.com.
Perfect. Thanks so much, guys, and I appreciate y'all being on the show today.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Life Happens with Kim Hegwood. Be sure to tune in every Thursday at 10 a.m. wherever you listen to your podcast, as we navigate through the challenges that emerge as life happens. The content of this podcast does not establish an attorney-client relationship or constitute attorney-client privilege, legal, medical, financial, or any other professional advice.